Hello everyone, this is Victor Dantas here from the Zero to Hero Academy. Over the years, we have helped multiple professionals either get into the Power Platform market or some of the seasoned professionals within the industry up their game within the low-code technologies. And we are here to announce that we have a special program coming up between March 19th and May 30th. This is the Power Pages and AI Zero to Hero Mentorship Program. Join us, click on the link, access the lessons. You know how we do it. Live lessons on Teams, and then the recorder goes up to YouTube and you can follow if you are in different time zones, but we prefer it to join it live. Connect, ask questions. So go ahead, invite your colleagues, your dad, your mom, your grandpa. Let's everybody join the fun. All right, we'll see you there. Take care.
Without further ado, let me please hand over to our presenter for today, Nick. Nick Dolman has very kindly agreed to come along and speak to us, I think, about how to integrate Power Pages with Power Automate. So over to you, Nick.
All right, thanks everybody. Welcome. I'm going to share my screen. Just make sure you guys hear me okay. Just a little thumbs up will be good. And I will give Teams a second. I see my lovely desktop and all my scribblings, but there we go. And perfect. Just want to get a verification that everybody can see the Zero to Hero kind of homepage or intro deck there.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks, Nick.
Okay, excellent. All right, so let's dive in. Basically, just a little bit who I am. My name is Nick Dolman. I am a Microsoft MVP. I actually spent a couple years, 2 years at Microsoft, where I was working on the documentation for Power Pages. And when I started, it was Power Apps Portals, and we brought that over to Power Pages. So my face is still in a lot of those documents, although I see that it is transitioning over to new team members that are taking care of that now. Something I do tell people about Microsoft Docs, if you don't know this, there is that feedback at the bottom. So if you see a topic, no matter where it is in Microsoft Docs, doesn't quite make sense, or it's a little confusing, or you think there's gaps, fill in that feedback in the bottom. The team looks at it, they try to make the docs better. So just kind of wanted to, that's my little public service announcement on that. But for the rest, like I said, I'm an MVP and I'm an independent consultant. You can kind of scan that barcode. You can get my contact details. You reached out to me on LinkedIn or something if you have questions on this presentation or any others. Happy to sort of connect and learn about your journey and things like this. All right, so let's dive into the topic of the day. And we're going to talk about extending Power Pages using Power Automate. So you're probably wondering, okay, why do we need to worry about Power Automate with Power Pages? So here are the things we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about why use Power Automate and Power Pages, a few use cases for using Power Automate and Power Pages. Then we're going to go through a demo where we're going to actually build a Power Automate flow and integrate it into a web page where we're going to collect some input from a user. We're going to call the flow and we're going to see the results. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple, but if you can think about it, this is very powerful in terms of what you can do with Power Pages and Power Automate together. I will talk a little bit at the end about licensing because there's a few little caveats there we should be aware of in terms of licensing. Nothing too much to worry about. I mean, we're paying for a service. You get huge return on investment in terms of value. So just want you to be aware of that. So very first one, why would we use Power Automate and Power Pages? So right now, if you've built a Power Pages website and maybe you came from a world where you use Canvas apps, and you know that in Canvas apps, you can always go and you can pick from the 1,000 connectors that Microsoft provides to you. That's great, but in Power Pages, you don't have any of that. You can connect to Dataverse and that's it. That's pretty much where you're stuck. And then you're sort of like, oh, but yeah, but I want to connect. I want to connect to MailChimp. I want to connect to DocuSign. I want to connect to all these things. Well, you can't just naturally up until now using Power Pages. The web API, if you're a developer, of course, probably, and I know that there are some sessions that will cover the web API in the Zero to Hero series. It's great, but you're limited to create, read, update, delete, and associate. You can't at this time call custom actions using the web API. So if you created some custom actions in Dataverse, or you have other other endpoints you want to call, you can't do that with the Power Pages web API. The other thing you can do if you use Power Automate, you can trigger those flows from Dataverse updates. So if you're using a form, for instance, a new volunteer application form, you fill in that form on a Power Pages site, it creates a record in Dataverse, and then that will trigger a Power Automate flow, which will do a bunch of things. Yes, you can do that, but understand that that is going to run asynchronous, meaning it's going to do its thing, it's going to take its time, and then it's going to update that information back in the Dataverse table. In the meantime, you're going to have to refresh that screen or refresh that page to see the result of that Power Automate. And this could take many seconds or even minutes before you see that result. And especially with the caching and everything like that, it could be 15 minutes before you see that result in your Power Pages site. Now, we're using the Power Automate integration, that is synchronous. If you run a Power Automate flow that's triggered from a Power Pages web page, which I'll show you how to do, it's going to come back with a result synchronously, meaning you don't have to do any kind of page refresh or any kind of submission process, like that kind of processing. It's going to happen immediately, and it's going to happen very fast. And of course, this greatly reduces development time. So if you need to talk to third-party services, before this came out, you would have to create like Azure companion apps or use other techniques and developer pretty dev heavy techniques to integrate with other things. So yes, there is some developer components in here, but this should really reduce that time. So what are some use cases for Power Automate Power Pages? Well, basically we want to call an external service and get a result. So think of things that you might be wanting to do in a Power Pages site. The weather is a very easy demo. It's actually in the documentation for this. It shows you how to call the weather service and get that weather to show up on a Power Pages site. So yeah, nice little demo, but think about it. Maybe you're doing a travel site. Maybe you know, that kind of thing, or your hotel booking site. Wouldn't it be kind of cool if their end users could see the weather when they're making that booking or planning that travel? Then, you know, you can call that weather. If you're doing some kind of e-commerce or some sort of, you know, banking kind of thing, there's currency conversion. So as opposed to you having to write all this code within your Power Pages site to do currency, you know, convert dollars, you know, dollars to euros or dollars to Great British pounds or those types of things, you could actually build this in your Power Pages site. It could go and call a service in Power Automate and return those values. Other things like shipping costs, if you're kind of doing where you're ordering things, again, sort of an e-commerce situation or ordering a package, how much is this going to cost if you're shipping from, you know, California to here in Ottawa, Canada? You could put in some variables. It could go out to an endpoint at UPS or FedEx and get those shipping costs. Taxes. You have to do tax calculations. What province are you in? What state are you in? What European country are you in? Then you could actually call a tax calculation service and do some tax calculations on your Power Pages, your website. Or you could do other things. You could trigger some database actions. Remember what I said, you can't call custom actions, but you can call them from Power Automate. So you get your Power Pages page to call your Power Automate flow. That will trigger some database actions in Dataverse. So those are just some very short examples of use cases of where you can use Power Automate in Power Pages. Couple things. Let's go through the list of requirements before we dive in. We're going to use a Power Pages triggered response. So we're building our Power Automate flow. There's a Power Pages specific trigger, and then there's a Power Pages specific response. So that's what we're going to use. We're going to need to call that Power Pages actions using code. If we're in the design studio, and I will show you this, there's no ability to add a component to call Power Automate. I wish there was. I think there should be, but there's not. So we're going to have to actually load Visual Studio Code for the web and call that Power Pages code. Now, you are going to need licensing for Power Automate and those premium connectors. So here's how it works. If you already have Power Apps licenses, you probably already have some capacity to run Power Automate if they're associated with specific apps. I know there's sometimes a bit of confusion there, and it still confuses me as well. But if you're strictly on, you just have only Power Pages licenses, you will also need to get some Power Automate licenses as well to use this feature on top of your Power Apps Power Pages licenses. And the other thing you need to consider, and there are steps to allow this, is you need to consider security and user access to run flows. So if you create something, let's say, to check the weather, and you have literally thousands upon thousands of anonymous users visiting your site, well, these are going to count as flow runs against your flow licensing. Maybe you actually want to add a little bit of a gateway there, like maybe only your authenticated users, people that are logging in and booking a trip, for example, will be able to do something that will trigger and run those flows. So make sure you're, again, you think about it, well, I have hundreds of thousands of Power Automate flow runs, I should be okay. But if your website gets hit pretty heavy, those flow runs could actually be used up pretty quickly. All right, enough about PowerPoint. Let's go into a demo. So I'm going to go into my dev site here. I'm going to just increase the resolution a little bit just to make it a little bit easier to read. Let's hit F11 so I get the full screen mode. Cheryl, could I just get a thumbs up that you actually are seeing the Power Pages homepage?
Yep, we got you.
Excellent, excellent, cool. So all of you should, by this point, if you've been following this series or some of the other stuff, you should know how to go in and create a site by now. I've now created a brand new website just using a template. I could have used Copilot or I could have started from blank, but I started from here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go now in and edit the Power Pages site in the Design Studio, very much like you would do if you're creating your site as well. We're just going to give this a second to warm up. And of course, we have our Copilot off to the right here. We have our site. We can begin to go in and design and do all the wonderful stuff that we want to do. But what we want to do is we have an idea that we're going to run a Power Automate flow from our Power Pages site. So I could go in directly into Power Automate to do that. Or what I can do is I'm going to go into the setup workspace. Remember, we have 4 different workspaces, the pages, styling, data, and we have setup. So we're going to go into the setup workspace. And again, I think there's going to be other material that kind of covers each of these workspaces in more detail. But today we're really just talking about Power Automate. Of course, within that setup workspace, as it is warming up here, there's various things and things that we can change and we can add. And we also have this section. It's still a little grayed out. Oh, here we go. It's integrations. Keep an eye on this. This is where Microsoft is slowly adding new things. If we took a look here a couple months ago, all we would have seen, I think, is the external apps, which was like the DocuSign. But right now under external apps, we have, I believe, DocuSign and Stripe. That's still in public preview, but that's coming. That's exciting stuff. But what we're looking here is cloud flows. So we have this blank area where we could add an existing flow, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a brand new flow. And just give it a second here. And this is a Power Automate flow. So a lot of the same things that we see when we're creating a Power Automate flow within Power Automate show up here. All our different triggers, all our different actions. So what I want to do is I'm going to type in Power, start Power, so we get Power Pages. Remember what I said earlier, that we need to launch this from a Power Pages. So it says when Power Pages calls a flow. So that's good. I'm going to select that as my trigger. And here we're basically in very much the Power Automate Design Studio in a sense. Now I'm going to add an input. What I'm going to add here is a text. So this is the input that we would provide it from our Power Pages site to run the flow. So I am just going to call this category, and I'm going to tell you why in a minute. And now we could add multiple inputs here. Right now, I'm just going to add one category of a text, but we could add multiple. And then, of course, when we call this flow, we're going to have to make sure that those parameters are passed into our flow. And again, so if we're building a flow, for instance, if we're doing tax calculation, then we'll probably put in the base amount. If we're doing a currency conversion, here's our source currency, here's the currency that we want to convert it to. If we want to, do shipping costs, well, here's the weight of our package or something like that. So we need to collect that information and pass it into our flow. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to add a new step. And this is where, now that we have this information, now we have all of these triggers and connectors to our disposal that we can actually go and call and do something with. We could update Dataverse, we could check the weather, we could actually do things like running AI Builder, we could send emails. Sky's the limit. I'm going to use a very important, very premium Power connector for Power Automate. It's one that I think is probably one of the highly rated top ones. It is the Chuck Norris API. So if you're not aware of it, it's built by an independent publisher. It was actually Daniel Lakowicz, who I think some of you may know from the community. He put this together. It is a connector that talks to the Chuck Norris IO API. And what we want to do is we want to get a random Chuck Norris fact. And that's what we want our Power Pages site to do. And by putting in this particular connector, we want to choose which category. There are a bunch of categories here, but I'm going to select animal, career, celebrity, dev, explicit, fashion, food, history, movie, all of these. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to put in enter a custom value. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually pass that parameter from our Power Pages site. We are going to get our end users to provide the category of the Chuck Norris fact that they're going to want to get. So this is going to go out to that website, to that API. It's going to get that random Chuck Norris fact. And then what we're going to want it to do is we're going to want to punt this back into our Power Pages site. So again, I'm going to choose my look for the operation here under Power Pages. And this is where, in terms of an action, we're going to return that value back to Power Pages. So I'm going to choose an output. And again, it's just going to be text. And I'm going to call this result. And I'm going to put in the value that came from that random Chuck Norris fact. So we've done this. We've created our flow. I'm just going to call this Chuck Norris. Today is April 2nd. So we have that flow. I'm going to now hit save. And now this is a very simple flow. It's got one trigger, it's got one action, it's got one return value. Obviously, other flows are going to be a lot more complex, branching, parallel branches, checking condition statements, the whole shebang. We can do all that when we're creating these flows. So we've saved this. Now, a couple things. It's going to come up and it's going to say it's going to want to add that cloud flow. Here's that name. It's also going to have that URL. We're going to take a copy of that URL right now. We're going to need this later on in order to call this particular flow. Now, the other thing, we need to add security rules. So if you're already familiar with Power Pages security, Power Pages has this concept of security rules. I'm going to add a couple rules here. I'm going to choose both the anonymous user and the authenticated user. Again, I could have my own custom rules here as well if we only want specific people to be able to run this flow from the Power Pages site. So I've added that. And it said anyone can run this flow because I did choose anonymous users. It's just double checking that that's what I want to do. That's fine. I'm going to do this. And it's basically going to go in and just going to create that cloud flow, but associate it with my Power Pages site. So far, just to recap what we've done, we have a brand new Power Pages site. We've gone into the setup workspace. We've gone into the integrations. We've gone into cloud flows, and we've created a Power Automate cloud flow. And now we've actually got this associated to our particular site. All right, so far so good. All right, so now that we have this set up, I'm going to go now into my Pages workspace. and I'm going to create a brand new page, and I'm just going to call this Chuck Norris Facts, or yeah, I'm just going to add that page to the navigation. Simple stuff. I'm going to click add. And now we have this page here, and I can go in, begin to design and add things to this page. I'm not going to go too deeply into the Pages workspace here because you guys have seen all this before. Of course, I could use Copilot to help design that page as well. But now what I'm going to do is going to go into one of my other favorite features of the Power Platform, and that is the Visual Studio Code for the web. And what I like about this is directly within my Power Pages Design Studio, I can go in and edit code. It's going to open that Visual Studio Code editor. I wish, I've asked Microsoft for this. I wish they could also have that in model-driven apps. When we're working on JavaScript and model-driven apps, just would make so much easier. I'm currently using the XRM Toolbox Web Resources Manager, which works great. I love it, but this just would be a little bit easier yet. All right, so we see here I'm in my Visual Studio Code editor. I have this Chuck Norris Facts webpage. Now, what we're going to need to do is, what I didn't really mention here is actually if I go back into, just give me 2 seconds here. I'm going to F11 this. If I were to go back into this Design Studio page here, I'm just going to cancel. There is no component to add for the Power Automate flow. I wish there was a little circle here that said Power Automate. I wish I could select it. I wish I could pick my flow from a drop-down list, put in, line up my parameters to a form or a couple fields, very easy, and just walk away. But unfortunately, that's not the case. We actually have to add some code here. So I'm going to go back in here, and what I'm going to do is, here's the page. Here's by default the divs and everything it's setting up for that page. What I want to do though is basically I want to be able to create a page where it's going to talk about Chuck Norris Facts. Those categories, if you remember those categories, I want that to be a drop-down list. I don't want the user just to key in something, and then I want a submit button. And that submit button, what I want it to do is to call the Power Automate flow and run and get that Chuck Norris fact. So what I could do is I could start building out and building up my form, building up the fields using HTTP or HTML labels and text inputs and all those types of things. But I have a friend that can help, and that friend, his name is Copilot, or her name, or their name, or however you want to put it. So here I can actually go into my Copilot here, and I can put in a prompt. So I've already created a prompt earlier. I'm going to paste that in, and basically I'm saying, it's kind of hard to read here. So what I'll do is I will copy what I put in for a prompt, and just open that up here in Notepad, just so you all can see it, and make the zoom that in a little bit. Zoom in or zoom out? Zoom in is Control plus. Let me just do Control plus. I'm basically saying, create a well-formatted web page with the title Chuck Norris Facts. Add a pick list containing the following values. And these are the values that we got, that we know: the categories: animal, career, celebrity, dev, explicit, fashion, food, history, money, blah, 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 blah. And then add a form submit button and a hidden section where we can show a paragraph that we generated by a script that I will add later. So that's our prompt, and we're going to get Copilot to do that. So this is the beauty of Copilot. And yes, I could create a page and go through this, but I'm feeling a little bit lazy right now. So instead, I'm actually getting it to generate that for me. It's working on it. Of course, the little Copilot, is chugging away. So I've got this section block. I can review this. I can go back in and make some changes if I want, but this actually looks pretty good. I'm just going to highlight this. I'm just going to replace all that. So now I have this particular code created on my web page. It's found the divs. It's created that select list. I didn't have to key or program any of that. I got my submit button, and then I have my little section here for the fact. So I'm just going to hit Control S, which is now going to save that into my portal metadata. I'm going to go back into the design studio here. I'm just going to do a sync. What that sync does, it takes that information that's being stored in Dataverse and showing that on my Power Pages web page. And basically, it's going to show me a page like this, Chuck Norris Facts, with the little drop down and everything. Let's just do a little preview here, see what this looks like. This is always the fun part. We're just waiting for that little spinner to finish up. And here we go. So here is our page so far. Let's increase the size of it, as you can see. So here's Chuck Norris Facts. Here are all my different options, and I could hit submit. Now, of course, I haven't wired up that submit button to code yet. I will need to do that. And of course, what I can do is I can, okay, that's cool. That part works. I can go back into the design studio and I can go back into edit code. And then I can continue on to create my code to deal with all this. Now, this is very much like a cooking show. If you're gonna, yes, we could be here for hours as I go back and forth working with Copilot to generate this code. I would like to say that yes, Copilot can generate this code for me. I can give it a shot, but I've been finding that it's not exactly doing what I want it to do. So I basically I started out with a big prompt, basically, and I can kind of show you what it says. Just give me a second here. Basically, add an event listener to the submit button. The function should take the pick list value and pass it as a JSON object called payload to an element called event data using the data sub-element category. The payload object should be passed using an AJAX safe post to the URL. And here's that URL. Remember, we copied that earlier when we created the URL. So I posted that in, and it's going to return a text value called result, the value displayed on the fact to display element above. So I could take this prompt, begin to work with this or break it out. And this is the beauty of Copilot. I can go in and begin to add, I'm going to add that script or that prompt in here. And it's going to work on it, think about it for a while. And obviously, it's probably my prompting needs a little bit of work. I know I got in some nitty-gritty details. Now you see here, it did create code for me. Now I put that in. It doesn't like it right away because I forgot to add script tags. Now I could have got Copilot to do that for me as well. But ultimately, this is sort of the structure of what you're going to have to work with in order to get this to function fully. Now, basically, it's taking the submit button, it's grabbing that pick list value, it's adding it into a particular string payload, and then it's going to post it to that URL using a post function and get the value back. This code currently doesn't work as it stands right now, just because I've had to reiterate back and forth and couldn't quite get it working. So I am going to go other code that I used before that I know does work. So I am going to go pop over to my design studio here. I'm going to cheat a little bit, go to my home page, and I'm going to go into the site that I did create earlier once it shows up. And I probably should have had this queued up. I'll know that for Thursday. So that's site 1. This is site 2. I'm going to go into edit here. And if we take a look on the this Chuck Norris page, I did spend a bit of time in formatting this page a little bit, so the button looks a little bit nicer and the dropdown looks a little bit nicer. Let's take a look at this code and we'll walk through it before we go too far down the path, just so you guys at least see how this code is put together. So basically, very similar to what I did before. Now, the other thing is I did add some inline styling There's certain people, I won't mention by names, that say we shouldn't do this. We should have our CSS in their own separate files. 100% agree. This was just something quick and dirty that I did. So don't tell folks that I do this that way for this. But the same thing here, we have our pick list, and then we have our basically area where we're going to get that fact back from. Now here's the code. So basically what we're doing is on that submit function, we're going to call that. We're going to capture some of this information, that pick list value. And then from the URL, here is that URL that got generated, that when we created our Power Automate flow, we're going to need to make sure we keep that. If we've forgotten about it, we can always go back to the setup workspace and grab that. We've added our data structure in terms of the category. We've strungified that into a JSON. And now we're using the Ajax, using the shell.ajax safe post. We're posting this to that URL. So we're sending that payload, which is really just the category at this point. And then when that function is done, it's going to send back a response. Now, here's the key thing. This is going to happen synchronously. It's going to basically cause that flow to run in a secure manner. That's the other cool thing. This is secure. So I can't just take this Power Automate, this URL here. If I just go to some other browser and just plunk that in and try to run it, I'm going to get an error message. I'm even going to be so bold as I'm going to grab that. Let's just go to a brand new page here. I'm even going to go to just a different browser profile completely. And if I just do HTTP this, and immediately it's going to try to log me in and do other things. So it's basically not going to let me actually run that with authentication. Even if I were to actually authenticate with this particular user account, I'm basically, my identity provider. Even if I was on that tenant, it's still only going to allow flows that are going to be running from that Power Pages site. So anyways, let's go back to the code itself. Oh, actually, not that code. It was this code. So here's our URL. Here's our payload. We're going to pass it back, and then we should be able to get a result. So let's actually try this out. I'm going to go back to my page here. I'm going to go into preview, which of course we all know refreshes the cache on our page. And actually had this is also where the dev tools come into play. Give this a second to refresh. Actually, that's this page I want. All right, Chuck Norris facts. Let's pick a category here. I'm going to pick money. Let's see what comes up. I got to be careful. Some of these get a little maybe not suitable for work either, but let's hit submit. There we go. Chuck Norris fact. A mugger thought he was going to take Chuck Norris's money. His funeral is tomorrow. Ooh, okay. Let's avoid politics and religion. Let's go to science. Chuck Norris fact. Chuck Norris eats lightning and shit. Okay, so anyways, you get the idea of what this, what we can do with Power Automate. So basically what it's doing, it's running Power Automate. It is running it from Power Pages. It's running it synchronously, meaning it's very quick. You notice how quick it's coming, and it's getting out this information pretty quickly. So if I were to go back into here and then flip to my home page and go into the Power Platform, take a look at Power Automate directly. And look at my flows. And I'll just increase the resolution a little bit. So this is the one that I set up earlier that's running. And we can actually see some of the history here. So we just saw that this ran a few seconds ago. If I go into that, see how it ran successfully. It's gone through the steps and got that Chuck Norris fact and returned it to Power Pages. So yeah, that in a nutshell. I know this is a pretty quick demo, but I think I showed you the kind of the key components of this. We did talk about creating the flow using the Power Automate trigger. Again, this was just the Chuck Norris connector. We could use out of the 1,000 connectors, we could use probably most of them for various things. Once we got this to run, then we spat back a value that we displayed on the page. On that page itself, remember we had to use code to create that. So with that code, we had to kind of create that structure to create our particular page. And then we actually had to create some JavaScript in an Ajax called a doelman post, posting that information to our URL, which we got generated from Cloudflow. Again, it will only accept that URL coming from a Power Pages site, so we know that we're secure. And of course, we had that extra layer of security where we had to specify the web roles that were actually allowed to run this particular code. And then we got that information back here, and then we're able just to pretty much just post it or put it back in that particular site into that particular tab, that heading. Whew, a lot of information there. Basically, I really hope you found that particular thing interesting. What I will talk about briefly, we'll have some time for questions. Oh, I do. Okay, applauding. Good. We talked about the demo. A little bit about licensing. The Power Pages authenticated user and anonymous user packs don't have embedded licensing for Power Automate. So even if you have Power Pages licensing, you don't get Power Automate licensing with that. You are going to need to get Power Automate licensing separately. So that's just something to keep in mind. Yeah, so basically, I'll probably turn it over to questions. Quick little self-promotion. If you're not already listening, check out the Power Platform Boost podcast with myself and Erika Ackerbeck. Erika is going to be doing a Zero to Hero session on making your Power Pages site not look like a Power Pages site. Her presentations are amazing when it comes to formatting and styling Power Pages, so check out her information. And basically, yeah, big thank you. But before, I'm not going to sign off yet. We have lots of time for questions. So I'm just going to basically turn it back over on the screen and see if there's any other. Well, I guess there was questions in here. Okay, cool. People have been asking questions. Have the questions been answered, or is there anything still outstanding?
I think Nikita is making our job much easier.
Okay,
It's been
awesome.
amazing.
Excellent. Cool. Okay, cool. But yeah, any other questions or any, like, again, don't be shy. Come off mute and ask away. Oh, I got
Hey Nick, this is Vivek. I was gonna ask, how are you managing ALM for this? I've been using site settings. I don't know if you have any other better ideas there.
to be honest, I know that there are some ALM issues on the new pipelines for this. I did see some information. It's actually interesting because the thing is with site settings, though, you have to go and update your site settings manually in your downstream environments, which is really kind of breaks that whole ALM process. Ideally, if they could be passed in something like environment variables or something like that, that'd be really cool. For the Power Automate, I know that there were some caveats there, and I should have been better prepared with that. But yeah, I've not really gone to a point where I've needed to really do full ALM with this yet. But yeah, so I know that didn't answer your question, but probably that's where I'd begin with is probably site. I like to keep everything in site settings. But I am hoping that Microsoft addresses some of those the pipeline ALM issues that site settings are sort of presenting right now. And I know I provided that feedback back from them. They've acknowledged it. So my fingers crossed we see some information from them soon on that point. Hope that at least pointed you in the right direction, Vivek. I know that wasn't the best answer, but
Oh, thanks.
cool. I think Jean-Francois sorry, no, Mark had a question first. Sorry, I'm following the number of the hands.
Hi, Nick. Thank you for the session. Was wondering, well, it's not really a question. It's more on the same line of thought of what you said, that you hope that it's going to become configurable from the Power Page Studio. Also, what would be neat is if we could run those flows against the grids just the same way as we can execute workflow actions. Workflows against particular items in lists.
Yep. Yeah, that would be really, I totally agree with you. And unfortunately, I think the only way to do that now is if we'd have to kind of go in and either create our own custom list. And I know I have a couple, blog posts on using Liquid to create lists of information and that kind of thing. But yeah, that'd be a great feature as well. Be able to select that, but like it's the same in model-driven apps to select a row and run the flow against that, but only within a Power Pages context. Cool. Yeah. Cool. Thanks, Mark. Jean-Francois?
Yeah, my comment is similar to Mark's. Like, do you have any thoughts along, like, I can call a Power Automate flow from Power Pages, but I don't know which contact is calling it, so I don't know what records they have access to. So
yeah, that's a great, because we don't know who. It's hard to identify sometimes who is running stuff. I know there was a blog post by somebody, not so much in the context of Power Automate, but in terms of who changed what from a contact perspective. But again, it was again another situation of you'd have to do some extra work to capture the contact that kicked off that particular flow or made that action. Because right now, if you look at the auditing, everything's done by the system user, or it's not the system user, the portal user that got set up on your app registration. So yeah, from an auditing perspective, there's nothing nice out of the box, although there are solutions out there in the community that I've seen to address it. But again, there's extra work we need to do to make that happen, including kind of running these flows. Now, I guess, yeah, we still have to capture that information, because I was just thinking out loud, if you run the flow, you could still do a query against the user, the contact table where it's coming from, but you still need to pass the current user ID as a parameter into that Power Automate to see if that contact really should be running that flow or not as well. Now, yes, there is security with that, but even if it's on a specific record. So again, I'm just talking out loud, but great conversations with this. This kind of gets the ideas flowing a little bit.
thanks.
Cool. Looks like Nikita. Oh yeah, thanks Victor for posting that. That's from Oliver, identifying the portal user via plugin. Can you capture an anonymous user IP on a flow run? You probably good question if you could do that. I don't know that. Maybe someone else can answer that one. I know you could capture some information from, yeah, I like to think you can, Victor. I agree with you. Yeah,
There
it
is
can be
a
spoofed.
website, like we have actually implemented that. Like there's something called fetch-ip.json, something like that, which you just put a small script, and you can get the IP address of a user.
And then once you get that, then you could pass it. But that could be spoofed. But yeah. So Aaron.
Hey, Nick, great demo. Thanks so much for opening my eyes. I 100% assumed there was just a button that I would be able to click and wire everything up. So good to know. And thanks so much, Nikita, for the link to the actual documentation to do it. Just kind of that previous discussion. Sorry, and on the IP thing, I swear I saw someone post a plugin the other day for grabbing IP address in your portal and being able to make decisions based on it. I'll try and source that link. But it seems from a kind of solution architecture perspective, it might be when we look at that Dataverse rows and the way we're creating these, that you almost structure the body of your flow as a child flow and then wrap it for the trigger of coming from either just like because I was just doing kind of something similar with a business process flow, and business process flows have very similar like in and out it looks like, as these do. So I'm just wondering if you've thought about that for like reusability of the logic of the flow across the different modalities, I guess.
Oh yeah, though that's probably a good point in terms of, because at this point I just straight up called the Chuck Norris thing, but what I could have done is, I had a child flow that I could call that same Chuck Norris flow from multiple surfaces, including Power Pages, as long as the parameters are right. So, or, you know, Canvas app or whatever else. Yeah, I mean, that's yeah, it's good. It's great to think of, because that's the nice thing with workflows. With workflows, we're always able to do that, call it from different spots and reuse that. So yeah, this is what I love about this, you know, community. We start getting together and we start cooking up all sorts of crazy ideas. Cool. Any other questions, comments, complaints?
Nick, can you just go over licensing again for Power Automate?
Like all of Power Automate licensing?
No,
Which-
related to pages, right? Like, do I buy a pages capacity for each one of the users? How do I assign it?
Mm.
There was a
So-
question like, do I need to get Power Automate license for each one of my users on my site?
No, you would have like no. I think what happens is you'd have your power so let's just say we're going from a pure, we have an absolutely greenfield experience. So we'll get our Power Pages licensing. So we probably get it, in that case, we get a combination of a authenticated user pack and anonymous user packs. The anonymous users would allow so many anonymous users to visit our website, and then the authenticated users would allow so many users to visit our website and log in on a monthly basis. And basically that just basically means that if you have 200 users, 200 users can go to the site once and unlimited times throughout the month. It didn't used to be like that. It is now. And if you're an anonymous user and then you actually log in to become an authenticated user, then that anonymous user is not tracked either. And then with that, you get 5 gigabytes of Dataverse capacity. So there's your website set up. Now the Power Automate, this is where you could probably, if you want to call the Chuck Norris flow, then what you would need is probably a per flow license. So we would get that per flow license and then assign that to the Chuck Norris Power Automate. And then that will give you, I don't know sure how many runs it would give you, but then that would, so you wouldn't need a Power Automate per each of your authenticated users. What you would need is that per flow license for whatever number of flows that you're going to be running. And again, any licensing question is based on, in my interpretation, caveat, please read the Power Automate licensing guide or talk to your local Microsoft sales professional. Even though I don't work for Microsoft anymore, I'll still say that because licensing is one of these, yeah, but what about this and what about that? But that is my current understanding. Power Automate licensing, you can get it a per flow. Power Pages licensing, it's based on authenticated and anonymous users. And that going from there. Hopefully that answers that question. Associate the flow with the Power Pages app. Could you utilize Azure Pay-as-you-go? I'm not exactly sure how Pay-as-you-go works in context of Power Automate. I know in Power Apps, and for Power Pages, it's kind of on a month-to-month basis. Yeah, I really don't know that particular answer to that one. That's a great question, though. So cool. Anything else on this Power Pages? I'm back again Thursday, so I'll try to get a few more of these answers as well. But just looking at some of the other content that's coming up, like Victor assembled a true group of superstars and me to deliver this stuff. So this is exciting. Hopefully you folks are learning lots.
It's been absolutely fabulous so far, and thanks, Nick. Tonight was no exception. Today, wherever we are in the world, actually, this session was no exception. So thank you very much. It's your sessions are always great, and so I knew we wouldn't be disappointed. So it'd be great to see everyone back on Thursday for the next one. Yeah, so thanks very much for everyone for coming. And if we don't have any more questions, I guess that's a wrap.
Cool. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you all showing up.
Yep. And Victor, enjoy the rest of your holiday. Hopefully we'll see you on Thursday.
Yeah, and thanks Nikita. Thanks Nikita for jumping in on the chat and answering questions.
Yes.
I really appreciate it.
Hey, and I think Scott, you're still into this question, so I just want to take the 5 seconds. You don't need to share the flow with anybody like you would have in another context and Power Platform. It's you own the flow, and it starts with a trigger. Pages will call that flow from that trigger, so you don't need to worry about sharing that flow with I don't know who, because you could have anonymous use cases where you can have it shared out. So don't worry about those parts. Just make sure you assign a license to the flow itself. And there is a per flow license and like all these little permutations of how you can assign a license to a flow. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I was just wondering about the run only, because we obviously have a service account that runs all our flows, but if we use the run only, it always uses that connection and not the user that's signed in. So it allows us to then control the licensing. We don't have to license every single user. So if we do it as the run only and make it all go through the single connection, it does it easier. That's where I was going with that run only one.
Yeah, and I'm not a deep flow expert, but it's you either are the maker who created the site is going to run the flow, or you use a service account who owns the flow, and that's who the flow is going to act on behalf of. So that's the thing to keep in mind. You are now burdened with checking what your users should be getting back, right? So in Nick's example, right, you're just getting, let's say, weather, right? And flow is amazing for hiding the client secret to the weather service, for example, so it doesn't get abused by somebody else. Or your custom proprietary API. You know, you don't want to surface the special secret of how you connect to that. The flow, if you look at run history, won't see the history of who's running it. Right, is going to see the history that the owner of the flow is actually ran it, because it starts with the trigger. So your authentication to downstream services, whether it's, I don't know, taking the file that was uploaded and placing it in SharePoint or whatnot, that's all going to run on behalf of whoever is, it's the flow owner, and how you've authenticated to those connectors. And yes, per flow costs do get out of hand. Yeah, when you get into, you need to execute something 100,000 times a day, you might want to start thinking about maybe logic apps or something, or Azure Functions, since you're already stored in ProDev territory, but at least in the way that you need to call it. We do have a lot of customers that are using this. They are at enterprise size, right? For somebody smaller, your own entitlement to flow should be enough. Again, try to predict how many flow runs you're going to have, and then check with the flow license. And for performance, check your connector throttle. So all the connectors individually that you will use in that flow, check their actual connection throttles. They're all documented in the Microsoft Docs, right? Like, what is their connection, which is like, I don't know, 1,000 calls per 2 minute. You know, check what your lowest one is, because that's what's going to limit your performance.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I was doing a currency conversion on a model-driven app, and then eventually it stopped working because I abused it too much. So yeah, stuff like that you have to watch out for. Cool beans. Well, we have 4 minutes. That hopefully gives everyone enough time to have a bit of a bio break, grab another coffee or another drink before you move on to your next meeting or whatever else you got going on today. I know for some of you in the Europe time zone, you're hopefully winding down for the day, and some of you on the other side of the world, you're maybe just waking up to the day or in the middle of the night. It depends. This is what's great about these things. Everybody's from all over the place.
Fab. Thanks everyone so much for coming. Nikita, you've been amazing. And yeah, thanks Victor for putting this all on, and especially thanks to Nick for this evening of today's session, which has just been remarkable. Thank you very much. We'll see you on Thursday, hopefully.
Right.
All right. Thanks, Cheryl. I might have lost my job today. You did it so well.
I think you might need to edit the recording because we had a proper long chat before we started.
Yeah, we
We'll
did.
do that. We'll do that.
Perfect.
Thank you so much. And
Happy
Nikita, I don't know
holidays,
if you saw the
Victor.
chat. Thank you. I don't know, Nikita, if you saw the chat, but I think you have been hired into the Heroes. What is it called? The Heroes League, or I
Yeah.
forgot the name. But anyhow, we're gonna hire you for a lesson or two here on licensing. I know you know much more than licensing, but I believe between everybody that's been in the calls teaching, you know the most about licensing. So get ready. All right, everyone. Nick, thank you so much once again. We'll see you on Thursday.
See you
Bye.
guys.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Bye.
Thanks, Nick.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
you.
Thanks, Victor.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.